Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the City Commission workshop with the Infrastructure Task Force. This is our second meeting. We met a couple of weeks ago, and this is a follow-up. As we all recall, the previous meeting was basically a presentation by city staff to talk about the program that is being proposed here in terms of the rebuilding of our water treatment plant. And as the commission had promised, we would have a second meeting, which we would take feedback and questions. And but before we get started, I would like the chair of the Infrastructure Task Force to please call the roll of her committee. Yes. Can you use your microphone? Yeah. Is it on? You have to push the button.
Okey-dokey. All right, calling the roll. James Laborie. Michael Marshall. Shane Grabowski. Ralph Zeltman. Roosevelt Waters. Jerry Angeli. Peter Partington. And Marilyn Romano, I'm present.
You have a quorum.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll of the commission?
Commissioner Herbst. Commissioner Glassman.
Here.
Commissioner Beasley Pittman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sturman. Mayor Trentalis.
Here, thank you. So we have a quorum on the commission. So, Mr. City Manager, let's pick it up from there.
Yes. Good afternoon, or rather, good morning,
Still morning.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. So what we prepared today is to provide an overview of the outreach efforts that staff has done. As you know, we've prepared a series of meetings to make sure that there's awareness and enough information for everyone to understand the proposal at hand. We also want to share some updates that we've provided on our website, a series of informations that relay a summary of most frequently asked questions. And we want to just make sure that everyone is on the know of what the project is all about. And also, we'd like to have an opportunity to gain any further feedback from both bodies so that we may come back to the City Commission perhaps on February 7th and provide an opportunity for the City Commission to weigh in and decide on this proposal.
Okay, very good. Do you have any initial comments?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
I would like to add two comments. One is we are very pleased. Thank you, Mr. City Manager and Commissioner, for the workshops, the public workshops. I have personally gotten very good feedback from people who say, "Oh, now I know what they're talking about." So while it's not everybody, a lot of people were on those meetings and now have more information than they had before. And the second thing I would like to add is that after our last workshop, we knew a lot more this year than we knew in February when we first had our workshop.
Right.
And the members of the committee were very keen to have a special meeting amongst ourselves so that we could digest all that information and come to this meeting with perhaps a consensus or at least some ideas to put on the table. Unfortunately, we were not able to have a special meeting. Apparently, it is not in our resolution to call special meetings. So we have not met as a group since our last workshop. We would like very much to do that. Our next meeting is on February 6th. You are going to be meeting on February 7th, perhaps to make a decision. At least we would really like to have some opportunity to speak amongst ourselves and to be able to give you our thoughts. And I don't think there's enough time between our meeting on February 6th and your meeting on February 7th because, of all of the bureaucratic issues about minutes and getting communications to the commission. It takes a lot of time. So, if there is some way for us to get that information to you, or if it's not, is it possible for you to take it on your second February meeting so that we can give you our input? We don't have to answer that right now, but we just, as a comment, I'd like to make that comment
Okay.
to you.
Marilyn, are you locked into February 6th? It can't be any time between now and February 6th?
We tried very hard, but the city attorney says we can't do it. So
Why not?
unless you can convince him otherwise, we'll meet earlier.
Yeah,
Why not?
They certainly can call a special meeting, but they did not have a sunshine meeting at which to call a special meeting. So my understanding from staff was that a notice or a request came to them between the last meeting and this meeting to set up a special meeting.
So this is a sunshine meeting.
And they're all here.
They're all here. Can they
Sure.
take,
Do it
can they
now?
take a break and confer amongst themselves as to when they can have their special meeting?
They can take a vote to set a special meeting. That's correct.
Thank you. We could do that right now at some
Why
point?
don't you do it right now?
Yes.
Right now.
Okay.
Let's get it rolling.
We'll take a 5-minute break so you can do it amongst yourselves.
Thank you.
When I say a break, I'm break
Really
from the
break.
workshop, not a break from your
Well-
committee. What?
They can have the discussion now in the sunshine meeting. So
Right.
they can.
Okay.
So I understand you're just taking a break from the joint meeting, but the infrastructure task force may now, on the record, discuss the times and dates for their special meeting.
Right.
Okay.
Now we can dig in.
City manager, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, no, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, I just wanted to also share, I think it's important to note the outreach efforts and for those to go on record. So staff is ready to share how many people we reached with the virtual town hall meeting that was led by Susan and Alan Dodd
All right, well, when they
when they come back.
complete their meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask my members if the date of January 31 works for everybody, or they can make it work? Doesn't work. How about 31? I'm open to suggestions. Any of my members have a suggestion of a preferred date?
February 1st. Let's keep going.
All right, let's keep going. February 1st, it's a Wednesday? The 30th, let's go back the other way. 30th? No.
Yeah, I think as early as possible.
We're on to February 1st. That would give us some time. Is everybody good? February 1? Roosevelt? February 1?
Yes, if it's, I make it work.
Okay. February 1st.
Yes.
But we have to make it early because I have meetings.
Yes.
Because
We have to pick a time, right? 2
we,
o'clock.
we can, if we can have a motion for the date, and I think you can coordinate with staff with regards to the time.
Okay. I would like to make a
Madam
motion
Chair.
tonight. Yes, sir.
I move that we accept the date of February 1st for our special meeting with the Infrastructure Task Force.
Second.
All in favor? Aye? Aye? We'll do it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Here you go.
that should give us enough time to get the minutes and to be able to, and for the commission to be able to have an understanding as to what the proceedings were for your committee. Okay, having
Thank you.
said that, couple things. So you, Madam Chair, sent to the commission and to city staff a lengthy email several weeks ago in which you raised a number of concerns, okay? And I believe Commissioner Glassman at the last meeting asked you if your concerns have now been satisfied. I believe you said the answer was yes.
Yeah, I did say yes, and I did not get an opportunity to elaborate, and I'd be happy to elaborate on that for you now.
Okay, so do you mind if we start with that? And Susan, let's start with that. And I want to know if you can just elaborate a little bit about when you said yes, so elaborate what you meant by that.
Yes, I sent that memo to you, and I sent it to the staff. And I had subsequently, as I said in the memo, a meeting with Susan Grant and Alan Dodd to answer those questions. And essentially, the answer is found in the spreadsheet that they have subsequently sent to you. I believe you've seen that long spreadsheet about the how much money it's going to cost us every year to have the P3 compared to the same scenario with the city on the bottom.
Correct.
Assuming everybody's seen that. And the most important impact, or the most important thing that explained to me, and again, we haven't had an opportunity to do this together, but to me was that as it relates to the rates, as it relates to our recommendation to you that you not lose control of the rates, that spreadsheet is a very important document because it shows that the money that we will be paying the P3 operator is fixed. It's a certain number of dollars per certain number of gallons every year with an escalation clause. And when you follow that out, cha-ching, 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 it comes out to $1.44 billion. We are paying them. And we can talk about what you're getting for $1.44 billion, but that was not the crux of my concern at the moment. My concern is what impact that has on the rates. So if you take that number, 1.44 billion, and you put it into your already established rate model, we have an already established rate model, that's the Santec model, that projects our water rates. Now, when you take that 1.44 billion and you put it into the rate structure, the rate model, it gives you what the rate is going to be in 10 years. That's the other piece of information that's now good new information that says in 10 years the rate will be 73 cents versus the city's rate of 71 cents. Pretty close together.
Right.
Okay? So then the question is, that number doesn't change, all right? Something happens at the water treatment plant, something breaks, they fix it.
Right.
We don't fix it. That number never fluctuates.
Mm-hmm.
So you can reasonably say that no matter what else happens in the system to affect the rates, I don't know, our share of the project goes up, Pee Wee Dixie goes down, whatever else happens in that rate structure does not change the input of the $1.44 billion because it's fixed. So you can, I think, in my opinion, again, we haven't spoken, but in my opinion, you can reasonably say that you have not lost control of the rates because it's fixed price. You established the price, you put the price in the rate model, and you worked it all the way out to the end, and it doesn't change. So it's not like some P3s where you just tell the P3 partner, well, you go run it and you tell us what it's going to cost. We didn't do that. We said, they said, you've got to give me this amount of money to do this job. We took that, if you take the deal, that's the amount of money that gets plugged into the model, gets processed over the 30 years, and you have not lost control of the rates relative to this project.
Okay.
So that was clearly one of the very first things I wanted to understand in my own mind.
It's a lot, it's a deep dive, it's a lot to understand, I
Right.
agree with you.
And then there was a second part of it, which was the second part of the memo. Well, what if we did it ourselves? And it's the same spreadsheet, okay? It's the number 4 spreadsheet, the number 4 examples. So if the city does it, we still have to pay for the plant, we still have to do, and all that gets cha-ching, 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 cha-ching out. And ours number came out to, bottom line, $122 million less over 30 years. Now, you can go back and look at those inputs yourself and question whether it was correct or not correct, but some of them are fixed and you can't fool around with them. One of them was an estimate. Again, there's estimating going on here. But if you appreciate and understand that analysis, the delta between our doing it and their doing it is very small, and over 30 years, obviously. But the most important part is the difference between our doing it and their doing it is that's a fixed price. The 1.44
And they'll
is
get
fixed.
it done in 2 years less time.
That's for you. Those are considerations that you know, are important to you, but they were not the ones that we were concerned with. So when you look at the two analyses, and one of them is fixed and one of them isn't, well, from our perspective, I take the fixed price because then the rate structure, we don't lose control of it.
Right.
It's fixed. So there was 2 parts to it. The first part I explained, the second part I explained, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to.
Okay, all right. Well, I just wanted you to, I wanted you to be comfortable with that, and that was because we wanted to respond. Now, also, I think, is it you, Mr. Zelman, that you had sent us an email yesterday, correct? And you said you wanted us to see it first before you published it. I read your email, and it looks similar to some of the things you were saying to us months ago. And I wanted to know, did you have the time to meet with any city staff to try to understand the city's perspective on the approaches that we're now taking Because none of it seemed to change from the first time I read your concerns to this email we got yesterday. Nothing seems to have changed in your thinking, and I'm just wondering if you've ever really had a chance to meet with city staff to be able to resolve some of your concerns.
No, I have not met with city staff other than at our normal Infrastructure Task Force Advisory Committee meetings.
Okay.
But I can elaborate on some of the particulars.
Well, he wants to elaborate on some of his particulars. Let's not do that right now. What I would encourage you to do, though, is between now and the time you guys have your special meeting, Mr. Dodd, be happy to meet with you. Dr. Gassman will be happy to meet with you. Susan Grant will be happy to meet with you and to resolve some of those concerns, because a lot of those questions have been raised before and they've been answered and answered in a very positive and proactive way. So I want you to feel comfortable in knowing that the city is prepared to respond to you, but just sending out an email and saying, this is bad, this is wrong, this is no good, without hearing the credible understanding of what these folks have presented to us. These folks have built water plants, and this commission is relying upon their expertise to be able to bring to this community a credible, reasonable, and somewhat affordable approach to trying to rebuild our water treatment plant. And I want you to have a one-on-one meeting with these folks so that you know that we're trying our best to do the best for this city.
Okay, so I might want to elaborate that a lot of those questions, excuse me, in that email and that report were presented during the Infrastructure Task Force meeting, and I did get individual responses, not really stating that this is bad. I'm questioning whether or not it is good engineering practice, for an example, to locate the new water treatment plant on a well site with 30 or more wells.
And so I've asked that same question, and city staff, I think Dr. Gassman was the one who gave the explanation to me, and it makes a lot of sense doing it this way. So maybe you should have that one-on-one discussion with Dr. Gassman.
Okay, and I can tell you that I've been in contact with the Department of Environmental Protection and Regulations to find out, just basic question, are there problems associated with this type of design? And the answer came back, yes, it appears that you're going to have to lose a lot of the wells at the Prospect well site if you put the two deep injection wells in there, because individually they have like a 500-foot radius around where no wells or no open body of water can be in that.
I understand what you're saying, but keep in mind that a lot of the design above ground is dictated by what's below ground. And your point is well taken, but there's an impact of rising sea levels and the anticipated movement of the aquifer, the source. And Dr. Gassman gives is she here today? No. She's not here, I understand. But she's the one that gave me the explanation as to why it needs to be moved. Otherwise, we're going to have serious problems because of rising sea levels. So have that conversation with her, and I think some of your fears will be assuaged. I believe so. But hey, nothing's going to be perfect, right? We all know that. We're doing our best to try to take the best that we have to work with and make it work for the community and make this thing happen. We really need to get started on this water plant. We cannot afford to wait any longer. So, yes, sir.
Peter Paddington.
Hi, Peter.
I have a question about the spreadsheet that the chair alluded to start with. It looks as though that the city is providing 75% of the capital.
Right.
And it looks as though that saves the project over the course of 30 years, something like $100 million. So is that, my understanding of that correct? And wouldn't it therefore follow, and I'm not recommending this, but if the city, and I think the reason why it saves the city money is the city can borrow more cheaply.
Correct.
But wouldn't it therefore follow that if the city put 100% of the capital in, that we'd save any more money? And let me just conclude by saying I'm not recommending that. In fact, I'm concerned that only the P3 provider is only putting in 25%. But I'm just trying to get at what the savings are by the city funding more or less, because our borrowing costs are less.
Peter, I do know that at the beginning of this conversation, they were looking at doing 100% for the P3 contractor, and we came back with the formula that you now see. But I'll let Susan follow up on that. And Susan, you can also continue with your report. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. What Marilyn had talked about on those spreadsheets that we had actually ran those scenarios with the city if we were going to go it alone and finance 100% of it. And yes, the answer is it would cost us less, but the answer was not materially less when you look at the impact on the rates. The other thing that's important in the P3 is the whole concept of skin in the game, and that the P3 provider also has an investment, continuing investment in the project in order to ensure that the operations and things are happening the way we anticipate them doing. So that's those things were important.
So they have skin in the game.
Yeah.
If I might,
Yes.
is 25% in your estimation sufficient skin in the game? It's not what I envisioned when I think about a P3.
You know, and as the mayor had said, initially it was 100%. And one of the reasons we tried to negotiate the city financing a decent part of it was when the costs went up to find ways to bring the costs down. I think when EY did that initial financial report, I mean, it's a range of what would be normal. I think 35% might be what you would see a little bit more, but again, we negotiated more so we could shave a little bit more of the price down from the ratepayers' perspective.
Yeah, but Susan, it's not just the cost of the building the plant, it's also the enabling works. And our input in that is going to be 4 times what this provider is going to. That's acceptable? I don't see that as skin in the game either.
So the enabling works would be required no matter who does. If we did the project ourselves, and Alan, I might need the public works people to maybe talk about what they are, that they would be required. So I'm just kind of working
I understand that. I
on the
understand
financing piece of it. So those would be required if it was a different provider, if we did it ourselves, and we're financing 100% of those enabling works.
Okay. Well, I think the concept of skin in the game, when you talk about P3s, is a much bigger investment than what's coming forward in this project.
Yeah.
If I may also say to the members of the commission, we have been focusing significantly on the 3 issues that we brought to your attention originally: the rates, the quality, and the control of the water. Which does not mean that amongst ourselves, having read the documents and the appendices, some of us more deeply than the others, that we may not, after we meet on our next meeting and before you take a vote, have some concerns that we want to bring to your attention regarding the comprehensive agreement. Like just for instance, the quality of the skin in the game was one, and there's a number of things to testing, for instance. We're very concerned, quality testing. The way I read the document, it says that they will do the testing, we will observe the testing, and if we have a dispute, we go to a third party. I would submit to you that I would be more comfortable if we did the testing, they observe the testing, and then if we have a dispute, we go to a third party. I would prefer to have the testing within our bailiwick. It would be better that way, just because it's better that way, because this is a hybrid and you have to work these things out. Now, they're going to pay for their own lab and their own staff to do the testing. I don't see why we couldn't arrange for them to pay for our lab and our testing. This is not something that we work out here at this type of a
Mr. Dodd,
meeting.
do you have any
But we
thoughts on
wanted to
that?
bring that to your attention.
Yeah,
And there
all
may be others.
All right, let's see what Mr. Dodd has to say about that.
So as far as the relationship between us and the project company, during construction, we will have staff and we will also have the owner representative observing as they're doing testing. Typically, they do quality control. We do quality assurance to make sure that they're doing it properly. As we move into the operations phase, there's a laboratory that will be there that will be doing testing. It will be our employees who will be manning the laboratory. And as well, we'll have city staff who will be overseeing what they're doing. So even though they are responsible for the quality control piece, we will have staff directly overseeing that to make sure that it meets all of our standards, both during the construction phase and during the operation phase. There is within the contract measures to ensure that they continue to meet all of our requirements as laid out in the contract.
So are they going to be on-site city staff, or are they just going to read reports?
No, we will have on-site city staff, and also we'll, during construction, we'll have Hazen and Sawyer that will be helping us as well to make sure that we do construction engineering inspection services to oversee what they're doing. Again, they're responsible for the initial test, but we will be directly overseeing it and making sure that it's done properly.
Okay, we can talk more about that in our next meeting, and if that gives us a good level of comfort, we will let you know.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. Mayor,
Yes. Who's saying this? Oh, there you are, Roosevelt.
my concern is the overall budget that was kind of laid at the feet of the Infrastructure Task Force. I remember at our first
Put
meeting.
it closer to your mouth.
At our first meeting, after they told us everything that we needed to look at and be responsible for, providing information thereof. And then they said, and the good news is that we think we got a pretty good team to do this. The bad news is you're about $3.5 billion short, and you are to raise this. When I look at the fact that we are already going beyond what we said we were going to spend for the treatment plant, everything is going up. Nothing is going down these days. How are we going to stay within the budget that we set 2 years ago and come up with a good and workable solution for all things that is infrastructure related for the city of Fort Lauderdale? And you mentioned it's time to get this done, and I agree with you, but I would much rather see it done correctly than done quickly.
Well, I don't think we can ever be accused of running through this process too quickly. So I will, but I think at some point, you have to pull the trigger. At some point, because if we wait another year, don't do that to yourself, Mr. Corbin. I don't want to see that happen. If we wait another year, I do not know what efficiencies we would achieve since we're fighting against inflationary pressures. So even if we were to chop off 5%, we're going to lose that much and maybe more. And I don't know in terms of design or efficiencies or any improvements that we could find. I think that our city staff, our consultants, and the P3 contractor have worked aggressively to try to make this the best project possible. And my hat's off to all of you for the amount of time and effort that have been put into this. Will there be shortfalls? Will there be mistakes? Will we find something along the way? Of course. That's the way things, we will. But the P3 contractor is absorbing those responsibilities, and that's the important thing for us. And it's a guaranteed maximum price, guaranteed maximum rate program, and I feel that we've gone to the best point that we can so far. I mean, I'm whether we can achieve greater efficiencies and greater product. I just think that we have worked this thing quite a bit, and I think that we can rely on our city staff and their recommendations to us. Yes, sir.
I forgot to introduce myself first. I'm James LeBrie, District 1.
We know who you
Heights.
are, James.
Okay. I want to talk about the availability payment. So Susan, can you come back up? And while she's coming up, Mayor, I'd like to remind everybody here that $385 million was a guaranteed price at one time as well. Susan, regarding the availability payment, I'm just concerned about
We
how
should have
are-
signed the deal back then. But we
or,
didn't.
Or maybe gone with an RFP. Susan, regarding the availability payment, how do we value the components that are included in that payment? So there's construction, there's maintenance, there's operation, management, risk. How are those things being valued? There's got to be some kind of dollar value associated with those components that come to a total so that you can calculate what the AP is going to be, correct?
So we know what we are getting for the availability payment, and I think that was presented on one of the slides that we have up here. So I might ask the folks from Ridgewood to come up and maybe go through those with you. So we could talk about what we are getting for that availability payment. Again, that includes the 25%, so the 121 million. 250,000 of capital expense is included in there, as well as, operations, repair.
Let's just think about that first number. That's their skin in the game, right?
Yes, but that's
Okay.
included in the availability payment.
Right, and so what's the return on investment on that? The availability payment totals like $150 million after 5 years. They get their money back really quick.
Right. Well, that's assuming that that's the only.
All right, give them 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good ROI, don't you think?
So, yeah, what we ran, our financial advisor ran was probably at 7.5% ROI. But again, as you know, that's what is in the market. So I don't know, would you like to come up?
Well, let's go on. No,
Okay.
we don't need
Well,
to have...
I mean, if you asked what was included in the availability
Okay,
payment,
yeah, let's bring that
we
up.
have a slide that has that detail in there.
I don't want just to know what the components are. I want to know how they're valued.
Okay. Well, we have the components right now, and maybe they can assist in how they are valued. But Mark, you want to come up? You know the slide that we're talking about, right?
I do. Can we, is there a way to?
Okay, I think it is.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Mark Janae with Ridgewood Infrastructure representing the project team. Is that slide, can everyone see that slide yet? I'll give it just a second. There. So Susan did a really good job at summarizing the components of what's embedded in that availability payment. It's our contribution to the capital for the plant itself, and then in addition, it's the associated cost of operating the plant over those 30 years. I think a key point of that to point out is any of the repair replacement. If we need to buy new pumps, replace membranes, whatever those pieces are, buy new pipe, replace valves, all of that is embedded in that. Those are not additional costs.
Okay, let me just stop you right there.
Sure.
So you've built plants before. You know what things break down, what things wear out. What's the dollar value? What's the percentage of, say, the overall cost of the plant for those kinds of breakdowns? How are you mitigating those things?
Well, I hope I'm answering your question. So we're mitigating those. So again, embedded in that pricing.
How much is embedded? What's the dollar value?
So kind of, I don't know that I can give a specific, so you're looking for, so of the 161, how much of that goes to the
No,
capital? How much of that goes
No.
to a component of?
No. You just mentioned that embedded in availability payment over time is the cost of materials or the cost of fixing things or whatever.
Correct, right.
How do you put a dollar value on what that is, that dollar value goes into what the availability payment's going to be?
Can I elaborate on that a little? And I
Sure,
think
please.
I think the person to answer that question, because I remember we asked this a little while ago, is Hazen and Sawyer. And we asked them, typically in 30 years, how much money would we have to put away if we were doing it every year? It's like a condo. How much money would we put aside in the reserve fund to fix the building up for 30 years, okay?
Exactly.
And I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because it was a little while ago, they were of the opinion that over 30 years, you would practically have to spend the same amount of money that you built the plant for to maintain it and replace all the parts, plus the inflationary value of all those parts.
Sure.
Because when pump number 20 goes out 1 year after the warranty, you're going to be
Correct.
paying triple the amount for that pump that we paid for originally. So,
And, right, and we have to buy that
could-
pump in year 25.
Right, so
correct.
am I remembering that correctly from the Hazen and Sawyer people? If you want to take a shot at that, to answer James? No, he says no. We're going to talk to you about this on February 3rd. We're going to have this discussion on February 3rd.
Okay, well, that's one component. So what are the other components, and tell me about how those are valued.
So admittedly, I don't know that I can give you so again, you're looking for, of that 161, what?
I'm looking for the availability payment that we paid to you
Correct.
every year for 30 years,
Right.
totaling over $1.4 billion. What's going into those? What's the components? And how are those valued in dollars that make it worth $1.4 billion?
Well, I will start with just referring Annex W, which is a big piece of the financial deal, has both the value of the city's subordinate note, which covers their part of the capital investment, at about $700,000 per month out of the 2.4 per month. So the capital piece is about 30% of that availability payment. So that's the starting point. And then, are you coming up, Michael?
Sure.
There you go. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Michael Albrecht with Ridgewood Infrastructure. So to give you some perspective, of the $1.4 billion that you're referencing, roughly $1.1 billion is going, over the life of the 30 years, is going to OpEx, maintenance CapEx, taxes, insurance, everything that the city would be paying for if we were not present. And it really goes down to, if you want to distill it to your question around what's the difference between, and where's all these dollars going, through the city's work, it's about $4 per month difference, meaning we at the Project Co. are $4 more per month relative to the city doing it on their own when you embed all of these things, pumps, OpEx, et cetera, yet the risk is staying with the project company, where if inflation escalates at a greater rate than 2.5%, that's on us to manage and work through. So it's that would be the approximation that I think you're looking for.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned risk, because you're valuing risk then just about inflation and the risk of inflation and what the impact will be on cost. Is that how you're describing risk, and how you're including that as part of the availability payment?
No, I mean, there's a tremendous number of risks from bringing starting with construction, bringing it in on time, on budget, building it to all the specifications that both the city has required of us, as well as Hazen and Sawyer, and vetting that process. We have to deliver through those, so the city is getting a water treatment plant that meets all of those specifications at the timing that they've required. Then from from construction into operations, it's commissioning the plant along with all the procedures and protocols that the city has dictated to us.
So can you put a dollar value on any of that?
We don't think about it in terms of, in this context, so I can't, I'm sorry.
Maybe I could help. Is it that you're requesting a breakdown of the proposal costs and wanting to see how much is fees, labor, capital investment, operational?
What I'm concerned, Greg, is that we're going to be paying millions and millions of dollars every year for 30 years. I would like to know what the city and the ratepayers, the taxpayers are going to be paying for and what the value of that. Is it truly what's the first 5 years is going to be $150, $60 million. Is it truly that value? Is it truly $160 million of value that we're getting in this AP payment over those first 5 years? Over 30 years, $1.4 billion? Are we really getting our value of that big price tag?
Can I make a suggestion? I mean, this forum is not really the forum to get into that. We have put the question on the table. We would like to further discuss this at our next meeting, so you know what the concern is. Everybody knows what the concern is. Let's try and answer those, because you got to do some math. You can't do this in your head here.
And we'll
We
work
have
with
to-
city staff
I just have one more
answer that
comment though,
question.
Marilyn, if you don't mind.
Oh, certainly.
So Mayor, you talked about we need to get this done. What's the value of the 2 years? What's the dollar value of waiting 2 more years, going with an RFP process? What's the value of that?
There is a value. It was
Dollars.
established by our city staff, and it would cost more money to build this project if taking an extra 2 years. You're talking more than $100 million,
Okay, so the value is 100 million,
at least.
at least, by delaying it for 2 more years.
Correct.
Okay.
And the risk of it falling apart or a hurricane hitting it and the city being without water for months. We don't want to, let me just tell you something. This commission, years ago, kept delaying the sewer projects, okay? And look what happened, okay? It cost the city over $100 million more money to try to correct the situation that it could have anticipated, and if it did not, drain its resources year after year and focus on rebuilding infrastructure. This report came out 6 years ago. You got to get something done. And here we are still talking about, getting something done. Now, really, Jim, I agree that always there are questions to be answered, and I, as Marilyn said, bring it up at your special meeting. We'll try to get them answered. But we really do need to move forward, because the risk is not just about money. It's about this city not having its water available to its citizens. Remember what happened the one day in which our pipe was broken? Right? One day. I do not want to do what Jackson, Mississippi had to go through and waiting weeks for water. We cannot afford to do that anymore. So that's
Add Flint, Michigan, add Baltimore, Maryland now, with what they're going through with their water. It's just an epidemic.
Mayor, I don't disagree with you,
Yeah.
but I never know it, only until today was I told that the city has valued this at over $100 million. So that's new information for me. So I appreciate that you shared that with me, and
Okay.
maybe we can get more information like that coming up.
okay.
Critical? Yeah, all right.
I would like to just
You can see what
respond
our
back to your statement, Mayor. My name is Ralph Zeltman. I'm a retired civil engineer. I have worked on water plants, advanced wastewater treatment plants. As you know, I've been bringing up a number of situations with, of course, the old vitrified clay sewer gravity main. And finally, they got somebody's attention. Oh, that's right. It was the regulatory agencies who came in and gave an order to get those things fixed. And so I'm sitting here, and I don't think I need to speak to Dr. Gassman and be all respectful. We can talk about the transmissivity in the soil in the Biscayne Aquifer and other features of of the soil mechanics, but I would like to talk with maybe the engineers and hear and address the question of if you're going to be, or not you, but if the design is going to have 2 deep injection wells on the site as opposed to being off-site,
Right.
then you run the risk of losing a lot of those water wells. And so what you're going to have to do is replace them. I think the design is in question here as far as where are the deep injection wells located, and so that they do not, the regulatory agencies don't get involved and say, okay, these wells are within that, each one of these 500-foot
Perimeters.
areas that you cannot use, you'll have to close them off. That's what I think I would like to ask the engineer, whether it's our engineer or the city engineers or the consultants.
Mr. Dodd, is this something you can answer now, or is it something that you'd like to, I mean, I don't know if you have an answer right now.
Mayor and Commissioners, when we were having the initial meetings 8 months ago or so about the siting on it, we looked at different orientations for the plant.
Correct.
And where the wells would be. And we do have Kiewit and Ridgewood IDE here can talk about those discussions. The 500-foot separation requirement was discussed at that time, and locations were picked to make sure that we are in compliance with all of the DEP requirements. As we go into the design and construction, they will have to be permitted by the state, which again will ensure that they are in compliance with all of those requirements.
Okay. So in
And
other words,
this is new information that we talked about today. So again, on February 3rd, we will be.
First.
Excuse me, on February
First.
1st, we will be
if
asking.
you show up on the 3rd, the meeting will have already happened.
These guys showed up on the 23rd. When we
Okay.
had anyway, but you can see what our meetings are like for the last 6 years. I mean, we get very deep into this. So yes, we will have some other concerns and questions at our next meeting. Some of them may be just questions for you to consider. I mean,
Right.
you make the policy decision is whether the number is worth the risk, okay? But we just want to point out to you, have you looked at what the numbers are in the risk? And then you make your decision. Is it worth it? Is time the most important issue here? Those are your decisions. So we're looking forward to coming back to you at your next meeting.
Greg, did you want to add something?
Yes, I just want to say for the ITF, we really appreciate those questions. These are very good questions. You're representing concerns from the public, and we're going to do our best to answer those and share as many numbers as possible for February 1st. I want to also propose something that I think that is very important for each and every one of you that are part of this task force to see firsthand, and that is to take a tour of the existing water treatment plant. I think that tour is going to help you understand the gravity of the condition of this plant. And that tour can be a tour that we can do a deep dive. And there is staff, there are scientists, there are PhD individuals that can also accompany each individual of the ITF that can talk about the different layers of the aquifer, and the different layers of where the positioning of each well will take place, because we really want to answer all these questions so that when you are discussing this on February 1st, you have very good context. And then there's a very big difference from seeing this on paper and on presentations and on PowerPoints than to see it firsthand, smelling it, seeing it, experiencing it. I remember last tour that we took. It was a 2-hour tour, and we didn't even cover everything. At the very end of the tour, almost at the very end, gentlemen of the plant went to take a tour and showed us the pumps. When we opened the door, this was like...
It wasn't staged, right?
This was not staged. I guarantee you that. But we opened the door, there was water gushing out of a 36-inch pipe, what looked like a 36-inch pipe. He said, not a problem. We're going to turn on the backup pump of this section of the water treatment plant. Again, we're talking about a 70-year-old plant. And so he did that.
On his phone.
Right? He did that, right? And again, we've retrofitted this plant as much as possible to keep up with the growth, expanded many times in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. In fact, there's a gentleman here that I'm looking at from Hazen and Sawyer that told us that this same question was asked by the commission in the 90s, whether we should build a new plant or keep the existing one. So this question has been prevailing for some time. And when they turned on the backup pump, guess what? Water started gushing out as well. So that's the condition of the plant today. And I think it would be very important to perhaps individually, again, because of sunshine, we can schedule those tours so that all questions are answered with very well subject matter experts that have all kinds of knowledge on how this works and how important it is to make this consideration and make a decision. Staff is not pushing one way or the other. We just need a decision to be made very promptly.
What did I say?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, Greg, I know you're probably not aware, but yes, as the infrastructure task force, I did have a walkthrough. I had like a 3-page analysis with staff and everything on the walkthrough and some of the problematic, situations. So I also did one for the Fort Lauderdale Police Headquarters in 1300 West Broward Boulevard and saw some horrible stuff. So I'm supporting for not only infrastructure, but maybe the folks up there to take a walk through and actually see.
Ralph, I invite you to walk through the city hall too and tell us we need in the city hall.
I've kept my eyes closed when I walk.
I'll take you floor by floor myself.
The elevators are a lot better than the ones in the police.
All right,
Yes,
guys.
Peter.
And then Roosevelt, that's it.
Wait, Peter wants to say something.
I have a question as well, but I'd like to echo what the city manager said. I did take the trouble of going back through the last 2 years of city agendas, and I find that we're spending approximately $5 million a year on an unanticipated capital expenditure for 5
Could you speak up a little bit, Peter? Speak up.
We are spending approximately $5 million a year on unanticipated expenditure on 5-ash because of things that are failing. That is obviously over. The staff, know that they're going to need money to repair things, but this is over and above from what I could see. But I'd like to change the subject, if I may, and ask if my understanding of water rates and what this will do is correct. Now, I went back to 2021, and there was a meeting there where the Commission approved a 3.6% increase to water rates, but it also said they would approve, or did approve, another 5% on the water rates, and it said specifically in the context of funding a bond for the replacement of 5-ash. But my reading of it is, or my timing of it is, that was before we ever received a P3 proposal at all. So my first question is, are our water rates currently increasing, absent any Commission action, at 3.6% a year or 3.6% plus 5%?
So the rate increase over and above, so what was programmed is that 3.6 last September, so September 1st of 2021 to October 1st of 2022 was the first year of that additional 5%. So September 30th of 21 was an 8.6% increase. September 30th of 2022 was an additional 8.6% increase, and that was going to be programmed over a 5-year period. What was anticipated, it would generate over that 5-year period $40 million, which we have incorporated. So in the rate analysis, that $40 million is captured as an offset to the expenditures of the availability payment and the city's debt service, et cetera.
You see, I'm concerned, Mayor, that I'm hearing it being said, well, by doing the P3, you're going to have to increase water rates. There's a number of 143%, I think, over a 10-year time frame, which is something like 9% a year. But when I look at it, it appeared that the City Commission already knew 3 or 4 years ago that they were going to have to increase rates in excess of 8% over 10 years to fund a new water plant, however it is provided. Is that a correct statement that I'm making?
You know, we anticipated that we would need more. I don't know that we knew the exact number, but the one thing to keep in mind is that 143% that we're talking about includes what would have been the 3.6 already. So it's not on top of that. That is inclusive of those.
We'd like to know what you guys think. We're waiting to hear what you want to say.
Well, there are a couple people who've signed up to speak, so why don't we, yes, Peter?
I have one more question. In looking at the draft agreement, I came across a clause, and I could be wrong, I think I scribbled down 12.02, that says, this is in the draft agreement, that after 2 years, the P3 provider is allowed to pass that responsibility on, I'm paraphrasing, to somebody else. I've simplified it, but can somebody confirm what that is saying? And I'm concerned that the P3 provider can kind of walk away after a very few years. Am I understanding that correctly?
So I think the question is, can the entity change? And I think the prior city attorney was working on steadfast on making sure that variable didn't exist.
So we have on Zoom outside counsel who has drafted the agreement. If we can bring Mr. Mustaine up on screen, please. Mark, did you hear the question?
Is Mark online?
What was it again?
There was a question raised with regards to the ability to transfer under section 12.02 of control from the operator to another company. The commission is interested in the safeguards that are built into the agreement with regard to that transfer.
So there are a couple of different types of transfers, and the one that we particularly have protected, tried to protect the city with respect to is a transfer of the operator, which is the entity that is actually operating the plant. So in that context, the only way that entity can be replaced is if the city agrees to whoever's coming in next. And the replacement can only take place if there's a default under the operating agreement. So we're trying to make sure that the city has the comfort in dealing with, if everything's working well, if you like IDE, that some other change doesn't kick them out when you don't want them kicked out. With respect to the project company itself, it's a little bit of a different proposal, and I think consistent with other P3 projects that we're familiar with, in that the finance people, the Ridgewood folks and stuff, they have to stay in until after the construction period, but after that, they can transfer their interest, and you're basically just paying those people, the operator who is operating the plant. So let me know, please, if that makes sense, but that's my response on that.
Well, that makes sense, but I don't know if that gives us comfort. Again, it's the skin in the game issue, and we'll talk more about this. And if the parties, either the finance parties or the operating parties, have an ability to get out of the deal in the very beginning of the deal, do you? This is a question for you. Do you all want to have a little more time that they are obligated to stay in the project Again, that's a policy issue for you all. We're just bringing it to your attention.
Roosevelt, you want to say something?
Just one last thing, Mayor. I know we have 3 new commissioners, and under the old commissioner, our time was extended, but normally when new people come aboard, they want their own people on the boards and committees. And my concern right now is, what are they thinking of the commission as this committee staying whole the way it is right now on into the future?
Well, we'll hear from the commission in just a minute. But if there's no one else on the committee that wants to speak, I'll invite, there are 3 people that have signed up to speak. And Trish Halliday, and followed by Boyd Corbin, followed by Victoria Olson. Is Victoria here? Yeah, there you are. Okay. Come on up to the podium. You got 3 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
It was here. Do you want the other? It's not that great.
Good afternoon, Tricia Halliday. Nice to see you all. Welcome. I'll be very brief. I want to thank everybody for I was on the town hall, and I want to thank you for your public outreach. Who did that? You guys did that? And that's why I'm here, actually, because I guess you had a lot of people on there, but it made me realize that I had a question. It was a very good presentation, but I found myself asking, they're going to be creating all this wonderfully clean water, and I was really kind of scared about how bad our water was. It's 16, I believe you said, 16? And it's going to be down to 5 or below. And we'll have this nice sparkly water coming out of there. And then it made me realize it's going to be going out into some of these pipes that are there, that may not be so good. And I know my pipes are not that great. So how are you going to explain to people who had this nice clean water and were spending like $500 million? I thought was $500 million, and I'm hearing all sorts of numbers now. I don't know what those numbers will actually be. But all these residents, especially in Fort Lauderdale, God knows what it's going to be with this other people, we're spending all this money, and their water may not be as clean as they think it's going to be. When it finally gets to them. I'm wondering what they're going to say. So I want you to keep that in mind, because that's a little concerning to me. So I'm going to look forward to hear what the Infrastructure Task Force has to say when you guys bring that up, because there were a lot of very interesting questions that were brought forward today so far. So please, everybody keep an open mind. And thank you.
All right, thank you. Boyd Corbin, followed by Victoria. 3 minutes.
Dean, our city water was shut down for a day because the valves didn't work. You fired the team that regularly exercised the valves, and today, years later, all the valves still don't work. Hazen still hasn't talked about using ozone and carbon together. They talk about them separately, which we know doesn't work. The 2021 research pilot study says ozone and carbon together will produce water with a color unit value of 6, which is crystal clear, costing $170 million, including completely rebuilding 5-ash, which will save $500 million, which could be used to rebuild water pipes. And clear water could be flowing out of 5-ash years before a new plant is running. It's much simpler to do it that way. I have a question. What is the type of membrane used at the proposed new nanofiltration plant? Specifically, get technical. The finer the holes in the membrane, the more dirt will be filtered out. If you filter out enough dirt, then you don't have to use ammonia to lower disinfectant byproducts. What membrane is currently being used at Peel-Dixie? Please get back to me. During the town hall, you said chloramine is more effective at killing Legionella than chlorine. This goes to Hazen and Sawyer. That's a lie. And straight chlorine is hundreds of times more effective than chloramine at destroying E. coli. Adding ammonia to chlorinated water is supposed to create monochloramine, but it never completely mixes. So you have free ammonia in water pipes, which is ideal food for bacteria. And you're not just creating monochloramine. You're also creating dichloramine and trichloramine, which are poisonous. 4 times a year, when you switch between chloramines and straight chlorine, you create lots of di and trichloramines as water travels through the city water pipes. Federally regulated DBPs jump to 6 times of allowable levels, but you're never testing during these free chlorination burns. Chlorine has been studied by the EPA for about 100 years. Chloramine still has not been studied on how it affects people, both directly and indirectly. I don't care if 20% of the water systems in America use it. The bottom line is it's cheaper to throw in ammonia than it is to filter out more dirt from the water. Don't let the for-profit company decide, because they will always choose the cheaper route. If we continue using ammonia, metal and PVC pipes will continue to be corroded much faster than with chlorine. And yellow, green, and brown water will continue to flow out of home water taps. 2 last sentences. And 35% of water customers will continue to have skin irritations and digestive disorders, breathing problems, etc. People with compromised immune systems cannot safely use chloraminated water, including people with HIV and chemotherapy patients. Can we get any of the answers to these questions?
I suggest I would invite you to go to the Infrastructure Task Force meeting. And,
I go to it.
You'd be allowed, yes, they're all open to the public.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, first I want to thank Mr. Corbin. He has been at practically every infrastructure meeting, and he's been consistent and passionate about this issue. At our last meeting, I promised him, and I notified the staff that we would have an in-depth discussion about this chloramine issue. And now that we know in the appendices what the filters are, we didn't know this before. Now we know what the parameters are, what the filtration system is, and the microns of the filters. I think it's a very good conversation that we should have at our next meeting, and we'll set aside a special time to go over that. It may not answer all your questions, but your questions are good ones, and they deserve answers, and we'll talk about that on February 3.
Okay, and one last question. Can I fly in my water expert, Bob Bocock, and can we join the tour of Five Ash? It's free advice.
Yeah, you know what? It's a public plant. As long as you arrange it with our city management, you can join whatever team is going to go take a visit.
Greg, is that okay with you?
We can accommodate. We want to be as helpful as possible in your quest to answer all questions.
Great, then I'll invite him. And
Okay,
when
very
will we
good.
know what
Thank
day
you.
that is?
All right, come on. We got Victoria Olson.
Hi, everybody. Victoria Olson. I know we need a new treatment plant. This I am for. I am not against this. We need the plant. I'm sorry, Corbin, but we really do going forward for the future. My main question, and this goes back from the beginning questions that Marilyn had. Ridgewood does not embark on P3 projects as a goodwill gesture. They do so to generate profits, which must be built into the cost of the P3 contracts one way or the other. I have printed this out and studied it pretty good. I cannot find the answer to that. Could you please explain how Ridgewood is going to make their profit? And the revenue stream can be derived from a number of different sources, including user fees, shadow fees, monthly payments, local taxation, rent, monthly water bill payments, or monthly government payments, or maybe a combination? Could that be explained? Because I think it would end a lot of questions for all of us. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I would again invite you also to attend the Infrastructure Task Force meeting on February 1st, and perhaps your questions can be answered at that time. All righty?
Excellent.
Excellent. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? All right, let me open to the commission. Start with the Vice Mayor. Mr. Vice Mayor, do you have any comments on the proposal? Any further suggestions? I know you took a tour of the plant. No? Now you're on.
Am I on?
Yes.
Okay, good. What's amazing, when we took that tour of the plant, Marilyn, myself, city manager, walks through a door and we see water gushing out. And my first thought is, oh my goodness. And I look around me and Marilyn's there and the other guy's like, oh, okay, this happens all the time. So this plant looks like it's on its last leg. I want to thank the Infrastructure Task Force staff, Alan, and your entire staff for the work you've done here. The only question I did ask last time, I don't know if Susan would have answered, how much are we spending per year on repairs and maintenance at the present time?
Commissioner, operating cost for the plant is about $13.5 million a year.
Well, thank you very much.
Does that include capital improvements?
No, that is just operation maintenance.
Just operation and
normal
maintenance, not capital improvements.
Correct, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Herbst, District 1.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple of questions. I recall back when we first started down this path several years ago, when we got the initial submittals for the unsolicited P3, which we rejected, that former city manager Lauderdale was moving on a parallel path for an RFP, that our staff was developing the criteria necessary for us to go out to bid and in a very traditional design build manner. I'd like to know what happened to that. How far did we get? When did we pull the plug on that, and why so? Because I don't think we'd find ourselves in a situation where, Mayor, to your point, it's going to cost us $100 million because of time delays had we continued to move down the parallel paths at the same time.
I think it was Mr. Lagerblum that drew us in this direction, if I'm not mistaken.
No,
Mr.
let me hear from
Dodd?
staff, if you may, Mayor. Thank you.
Mayor and Commissioners, we did issue an RFQ and engage Hazen Sawyer as the owner representative that had options to do both, to be owner representative on a P3 and also to develop documents to do it in-house. We have only issued a task order for the P3 portion of that, so they were never engaged and no work has been done that I'm aware of to move towards developing a design criteria package.
But I guess my question is, when was that decision made not to move forward with the design criteria package, and why? Was the commission involved in that decision? Because I don't remember that.
I cannot answer that question. That was before I came to the city.
Sure. Well, Greg, if you could go back and look through our records, I'm sure there's a record of it somewhere. There's an email,
We will do
series
our
of emails.
We'll do our best to look for that.
Right, because I remember, lengthy discussions at the time about the necessity of being able to do both so that we did not find ourselves tied to one particular methodology, that we kept our options open. And I'd like to know when and why that changed.
We'll research.
Thank you. My next question has to do with Reese versus Carollo reports.
Lease versus what?
Carollo reports.
Okay.
So there were two pilot studies that were done.
Right.
The first pilot study that was done was Carollo back in 2019. And Carollo recommends that we move forward based on water conditions that they observed at the 5-ash location with the plant at Prospect Lake and the technologies that's being utilized there. But when I look at the subsequent Reese report, which is 2021, which was an 8-week study, it indicates several things. One, that we could do the plant at 5-ash, and that we could use the GAC and ozone to achieve our target levels for clarity at that location. Now, I know I've had some conversations with staff. Omar, thank you very much for, and we looked at some of the site plans and things of that nature, but I still don't feel that I've got a clear understanding why the subsequent report contradicts the earlier report. Normally, it's the other way around, right? So we do an early study, we do a later study. The later study says, you know, we're building upon the work of the earlier study, and therefore, based on newer information, we believe something else is going to take place. In this case, what I understand to be a fairly limited 2019 report by Carollo is subsequently challenged, if you will, by what looks to be an 8-week more extensive pilot study by Reese, which then says we can build this at 5-ash, we can use the nanofiltration technology, we can build part of that there. So help me understand that, because I'm still not comfortable with the two different reports that we have, with two different sets of recommendations, with a cost associated with it that is order of magnitude greater. And while I talk about this, I'm going to also mention something else too. So Mayor, I'm going to take issue a little bit with your characterization of the 5-ash plant as being on its last legs. The Peel-Dixie plant was built in the 20s and is still operating. We were able to upgrade that to the nanofiltration technology in 2008, and to all extents and purposes, that plant is functioning very well. It's survived quite a few hurricanes since 1928 and works well. So I need to understand, for my comfort, why we can't do the same thing at 5-ash.
Omar Castellon, Assistant Director, Public Works. So the Carollo report did a pilot test, right? That it was like a tabletop test where they send water samples to a lab and they determined that there was a lot of organics in the water and it will clog, you know, the filters. Reese did another test, a full 8 weeks test, and they had the same issue. There was a lot of organic carryover and it clogs the filter. So they're not really recommending to do this, but in the report, it's not that clear, but you want to?
Right. So the Reese report, as I'm looking at it here, it's a 25-page long report, and they're talking about the biomatter in there. They're talking about color removal. They're talking about the use of ozone, hydrogen peroxide, ultraviolet radiation. There's a variety of methodologies that they look at here for reducing the color and increasing the clarity. And again, they talk, you know, at length a little bit about ozone, and they say by itself clearly performed the best for color removal of source water in the pilot. So again, I'm just, and they talk about the bromide, and as I'm reading here, it said bromide and bromate tested indicated no issue for bromate with all samples at or below detection limits while using the ozonation treatment methodology.
Commissioner, my name is Patrick Davis with Hazen & Sawyer. We're the independent entity that was called in specifically to look at this issue and similar technical issues. So not on how you deliver the plant, but basically in terms of the technology to treat. And I'd like to suggest, Commissioner, those are excellent questions, and you could actually take it back even further. There have been far more than 2 pilot studies at 5-ash. The first one that I'm aware of started as far back as 1990. So there have been
actually 1992. Yeah, I saw that earlier one as well. Thank you.
A number of different national companies have done these pilot tests. All of the tests were the origination of the need for the testing was to try to draw color down. So we all know that the color in the water in Fort Lauderdale has been bothersome ever since the EPA passed a rule to not allow us to free chlorinate any longer. So around the early 1980s, we ceased free chlorination in Fort Lauderdale. We began chloramination, and we no longer could bleach the color out. So the city has tested this over and over again, and each test found the same thing. that while 5-ash produces safe water, it produces highly colored water, and to try to drop that color out, it was unstable if 5-ash itself was the feed water system. So they failed using what's called high lime treatment, where you raise the pH and you try to knock out the magnesium hardness, which brings color with it. Worked fine in jars, did not work tried to do a full-scale test, couldn't work. BAC, which is biologically active carbon, to be added that to the filters, did not work stably when a company called Montgomery Watson did it back in the early 90s. If you fast forward, Commissioner, to the questions that you're asking, I would suggest that and I mentioned this at the last meeting, I think we're looking at it a little bit wrong. These are not, in our view, as the independent entity who read them, so we don't have a dog in this fight. These are not conflicting reports. The 2017 report by Reese, which is called the Strategic Master Plan, addressed every part of your system, water, wastewater, pipes, and plants. For water treatment plants, it said, hey, here's 8 options that could work for you in the future. They didn't test the options, and they didn't recommend an option. They simply said, of those 8 options, you should test GAC. So the city then hired Carollo, and they tested the GAC option. They found that the GAC option was not practical. We did our own calculations based on the work they've done to look at what that cost of replacing carbon was going to be and whether you could physically even do it. Because you'd have to replace carbon at such great frequency every 2 weeks that the plant would constantly be under construction forever. So that's not a practical solution.
Can I interrupt with that? I'm sorry, because that's not consistent with what I'm reading here. So it says that it's estimated that the GAC would cost $4,800,000 to retrofit, and carbon replacement would occur twice per year, not every 2 weeks.
Which report are you referring to, Commissioner?
I'm reading the 2021 Reese report based on their 8-week pilot study.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I misspoke. I'm back. I started with the 2017 report and what it said.
Right.
Then the Carollo report, which is prior
2019.
to the report you're looking at.
No. This is the 2021 Reese pilot study, not
Correct.
the 2019 Carollo report.
Right, I'm talking of the 2019 Carollo report. So Carollo indicated that it would cost $158 million per year. We did our own independent calculation. We came up with around $150 million per year. And the frequency of carbon changeout for a GAC system was impractical. And so Carollo then recommended going with nanofiltration and ion exchange. And they recommended a 70-30 split. And if you read that report and try to determine why 70-30, it does not explicitly tell you. As an independent entity looking at it, our best guess is that they did that in order to maximize the amount of raw water availability that you had. Nanofiltration, you lose about 15% of the water, depending upon whether you're using sulfuric acid, et cetera, on pretreatment. And so by using some ion exchange, you are preserving raw water, but you're putting in enough nano to remove all of the elements that are going to be of concern. So it made sense to us. Now, down the road, depending on future regs, you may end up 100% nano, or maybe you could end up with a little more ion exchange. This is a good start. The plant should be designed to be able to go either way.
I'm sorry, though, you're not. I appreciate what you're talking about with respect to Carollo. I don't want to talk about Carollo. I want to talk about the 2021 Reese report.
And Commissioner, I'm usually a better communicator than this, so I apologize for not
That's okay.
immediately grasping it. But now you go from Carollo to the Reese 2021. That report doesn't refute the Carollo. It looks at something different. It now looks at biologically active carbon to be replaced in the filters. And they ran various, what they call advanced oxidation processes, then they call ozone an advanced oxidation process, and they report results. The results that they reported were not consistent. You did not consistently meet the goal, the color goal from the that the city had decided upon as one of their 3 key parameters. Moreover, although it's not mentioned in the report, it did not address future emerging contaminants of concern, such as PFAS. So there's no expectation that we necessarily would meet a future PFAS goal if it was very low, because they weren't charged with doing that. What they were doing in that report, Commissioner, as best we can tell, looking at it from the outside, is they were looking for a temporary solution to get the color down in the city while the city then pursued however you were going to do your longer-term solution. So looking at their data, and we brought, by the way, our director of research for water from Hazen and Sawyer, who could get into the data itself, but we did not find that they met your color goal with that particular pilot. It's kind of like having a 1953 car, and you want to update it, that car, and you want to meet all of the new emission standards, and you're not really going to be able to do that. And the city has tried many, many times, and they have yet to produce a single pilot that we would say you should make a bet on from a human health perspective or from a financial perspective. So the data in that Reese 2021 report, it was not designed to refute a Corolla report. It was a interim step to take to get color down while you did something else.
I don't, as I read this report, come away with that same conclusion. It doesn't indicate in here that this is a temporary step. What it seems to indicate to me, as I'm looking at this, is that we can, just as we did at Peel-Dixie, take an aging plant, we can modernize it with current technology and meet the city's needs for water. So to use your car example, there are people going around right now taking a 1957 Corvette, pulling out the engine and sticking in a electric engine. And they're doing that for $100,000. And now you've got a Tesla that happens to look like a 57 Corvette. So am I taking my 1954 water treatment plant, a couple of years older than me, I hope I'm in halfway decent condition and not falling apart either, and putting in some new and improved parts, and I'm going to have a plant that's going to function for another 30, 40 years before I've got to replace it again, because I'm sure we'll have new technology by the time that comes along.
Commissioner, there might be a misunderstanding, but when Peel-Dixie was replaced, it didn't rehab Peel-Dixie and then add a bolt-on color removal technology. It replaced the entire plant. And it's interesting, too, that the age of Peel-Dixie, when the city decided to replace it, is the age of 5-ash now. So it came online in 2008, took 5 years to build, so around 2003. So if you go from 2028 construction period to when the city made the determination that we can no longer invest in this lime softening technology at Peel-Dixie, that's where you are today for 5-ash. So how you do it, if you want to follow your Dixie example, you would tear down 5-ash, or in Dixie, they save the plant and they, it looks good from the road. It's still there, but it is not part of the new plant. And that's fundamentally important to understand, because if 5-ash was rehabilitated in some way, shape, or form, it still has to be the feed water to whatever process follows that up, whether that's BAC or GAC or any other color removal process. So it has to work 24/7. It can't work some of the time in a pilot. It has to work all of the time. The reason pilots are done is to convince ourselves that it's worth scaling up and making that investment and knowing that it will work. The Reese data did not show that you met your color goal with ozone or with ozone plus BAC. And so we would, if you asked me today, would I recommend implementing the Reese report? My answer would be absolutely not. I would have no data to inform me to make a recommendation to the city or to the people who drink water in the city that this is something that they should feel comfortable with. So I cannot say that. But I would also say, Commissioner, again, we had to read from the outside. We weren't here. We don't know what the city was intending when they did those reports, but we didn't view it as one refuting another. We viewed it as each one advancing the science before the other one, after the other one.
So I guess that still leaves me with my bottom line question is, can we retrofit 5-ash? And again, from what I'm reading here, it doesn't have to all be done at once. So we could build on a portion of 5-ash right now, a nanofiltration component, right? Keep the existing line softening production capacity up and running. And then when we get the nanofiltration treatment capacity fully functional, we can begin to then dismantle the lime softening. Again, similar to what we've done at Peel-Dixie, where if you go, because I've toured 5-ash, I've toured Peel-Dixie, I've also toured the police station. In fact, in my 16 years, I've been in every facility we've got, including the compost one that we had over on Davie, and we sold that one too. So pretty much no place I haven't been here. And they've all been very interesting, and I've learned a lot when I've been there. And so when you go down to Peel Dixie, you still have those old facilities that are still there. They've just been decommissioned, right? So my question is, can we do the same thing at 5 Ash? Can we build, whether it's nanofiltration or whether it's the granular activated carbon with ozone, can we do that there while we keep our existing production capacity in place and not have to relocate all of this up to 5 Ash with, all of this up to Prospect Lake with all the attendant issues that go along with that?
Okay, I'll let him answer that question, but if you look at the RIS report, the 2021, page 3.
RIS report? Okay,
The RIS
2021?
report.
Okay, page 3, thank you.
Page 3.
I'm there.
If you go down to the 5th bullet there.
Existing recarbonization bases for ozone contact time?
No, it
Or
says
the
the
advantages of AOP BAC?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you read that bullet, it clearly states that this is a temporary option until the new 5 Ash facility is operational.
Right. I see it talks about considering a new plant. It doesn't say it's necessary. It says the city is considering a new plant. This is, as they say, this is a way that we can keep 5 Ash facility operational. What I'm wondering is, can we build on that and not only just keep 5 Ash operational while we construct, the Prospect Lake facility, but could we in fact simply keep it there as we've done with Peel Dixie?
Well, Peel Dixie, you're talking about 12 million gallons a day plant. Here we're talking 35 million for nanofiltration, and there is limited space there. But going back to this bullet here, I don't know if you're reading the right one, on page 3,
Okay.
where it says that this is to cover the 5-year gap
Yes.
from now until the new 5 Ash facility is operational.
Mhm.
That's what they're not saying that that's a solution forever. It's just until we build a new plant.
I understand that. I'm just merely asking, can it be the permanent solution? I guess that's a different question. It's not, I understand your point, Omar, and thank you for bringing it up. But what I'm saying is, instead of saying that this is going to be a temporary solution, can it be the permanent solution? And I understand your point about this being a larger plant, but we build it to scale.
Yes. Commissioner Patrick Davis again with Agent Sawyer. The thing that I think that we all should consider is if you went to 5 Ash and if you went to the front of the plant, there's an aeration basin. It's an elevated tank, and you can see that it leaks. There is reinforcing steel within the concrete, and over the years that has been breached, and slowly it leaks more and more. That's indicative of the condition of that plant, and I think it's why your 2017 master plan suggested replacement, and then also the Corolla report suggested replacement. You can Band-Aid plants and you can try to keep them going, but if you had a catastrophic failure of that aeration basin, for example, the plant would be offline, and it would be offline for a very long time. Now, the city has recognized this for quite some time, and so they hired a company. Again, it was called James M. Montgomery Consulting Engineers. Now it's called Stantec. And they said, well, this is a big risk. It's a single point of failure, and the city can't survive it if that happens. So we would like to bypass that aeration basin and design a system where we run new pipes to each of the 4 hydro treaters. That plant's really 4 plants. Whole nother issue, by the way, because if one of those is down, you lose a lot of redundancy, and you need all 4 of them. And so they actually did the design, but they did not implement it. And the reason they did not implement it was considered far too risky, because you now have to cut these pipes, and big diameter, very old pipes, and connect to new pipes all through that treatment plant site. And the city felt the risk was too high to implement. That was about, I would say, probably in the mid-1990 era. You probably still have the drawings and the specifications. So the commission and the utility at that time, none of whom is here now, I think you have all new staff, but those folks said this is far too risky to do. So they'd rather live with the potential catastrophic failure from the aeration basin than to try to go in and piece your way through that old plant and keep it going. this is a big, I'm a city of Fort Lauderdale resident, as I've mentioned before. I'm a native here. It's a big question. It's a hard question, and I don't envy anybody on the infrastructure task force. I don't envy you. If it was me, I would not put the Tesla engine in a 1953 vehicle because the frame and the metal is still 1953 vintage. The engine may want to continue, but not the supporting structures. And at 5 Ash, we have old structures. When are they going to fail? I don't know. I do know they will fail. Every structure of man fails eventually. This plant is old. It's as old as the Dixie plant was. When Dixie was shut down, they didn't use part of Dixie at all. They shut it down and they were going to actually abandon it and move everybody to 5 Ash and try to make all the water you need from 5 Ash. They recognized that was a risk too. They wanted to spread that risk out. So they put in the nanofiltration at Peel Dixie. And I'm sorry I can't make the answer easy for you because there's no study that's been done that says it's going to fail in 2023 or 2033. It's not really possible to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarity. I will add, not all things fail. There's this really awesome aqueduct
I'm a
in
1953
Segovia.
structure.
There's an aqueduct in Segovia that was built by the Romans. It stands about 100 feet tall and is still in operation. It's 2,000 years old. So hopefully one day we'll get as good as the Romans in building aqueducts, and and our stuff won't fall down in 50 years.
Okay.
But yes, Greg, if you would just get me the information, please, on why, when, and how our parallel track for an RFP came to a halt. I'd like to know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Beasley Pittman.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great information, great presentation from the town hall, visual town hall meeting that we had a couple days ago. Today, what piqued my interest more so was the conversation about the possible transfer of power. So I do too would like to have additional information regarding it, how long the developer or the company that will be running, how long are they required to stay in the game, having concern about that. I'm not necessarily a fan of privatization, so this is really, it piqued my ears when I heard that it's a possibility that after 2 years, they can walk away from the opportunity that they're being given. So if we can get some more information pertaining to that, I'm not sure. But Greg, if I can get that as soon as possible, I would appreciate it.
We will work on that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Glassman.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I too want to just say thank you very much, Marilyn, and the entire Infrastructure Task Force. It's been very valuable, and I really enjoyed reading everything you've put out, all the questions, incredible. I also want to thank Hayes and Sawyer for all of that work. I guess the first time I really started paying attention to this issue was probably in about 2017 when we had that comprehensive utility strategic master plan. And that dealt with all of the water system, and I think that was a really good beginning. I think I pretty much have read everything since then. As you know, more than 2 years ago, the prior commission, we did receive the unsolicited proposals. We went into shade meetings. We had the opportunity to have a lot of questions answered, and I think we asked a lot of good questions. I'm really happy that we did slow this process down so that our 3 new colleagues could get up to speed with all of this information. I think that the last few months of work and public input has been very, very valuable. I don't see this as privatization at all. I would just take that one exception. Commissioner Beasley Pittman, I don't look at this as privatization. But I do believe that this has been a great, maybe 2 years and 2 months, 3 months since we actually started. So we've taken our time on this. And I believe that we're at the point now where we really do, as you said, Mayor, pull the trigger. I think that's really important at this point. I think we've had excellent owner representatives. I think that the expertise that has been demonstrated from our staff as well. In other words, I feel very comfortable at this point moving forward. All of the questions that we've had for the last 2+ years, I feel comfortable with the answers. I understand why we have to replace this plant, and I'm at the point now where I am very comfortable. I'll look forward to reading what ITF gives us after their meeting on February 1st. But I think this has been a great dialogue for more than 2 years, with a lot of very valuable questions and a lot of very valuable information. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that's been involved in this. Ridgewood, IDE Ridgewood, I think is more than capable of delivering what we need to have delivered here. And I'm pleased that everyone is working together. But Mayor, I do agree. I think it is time for us, because I have the same concerns as time keeps passing. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vice Mayor, you want to add one more thing?
Hasten Sawyer, can I ask you a question, if you could come up for a second? When they closed the 1928 plant, that was, they redid that. That was totally closed to redo that, just as differentiating from then and now. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
and how long was that closed for?
Well, again, it's a slightly different situation because the plant is small. So the city did an economic analysis internally. They decided to close Peel Dixie, move the staff from Peel Dixie to Five Ash, and produce all the city's water from Five Ash.
Okay. So in that interim, we had Five Ash producing all the city's water while that was closed and that was being redone.
My recollection is there was a period of time that Five Ash made all the city's water. Now,
Okay.
remember, this is 20-plus years ago, so the demand on the system was much less back then.
So my point is, I think you're coming to my point, to now redo Five Ash is what's suggested. There's no way that we could close Five Ash and Peel Dixie could. I mean, so that's those two things are not equivalent.
No, Peel Dixie's not big enough. It's a
Yeah,
good question. You spread your risk out, you spread the energy consumption out, and you maximize the value of your piping and distribution system by keeping the two plants, but Dixie just isn't big enough.
Right. So closing Five Ash to redo it is not an
Yeah,
option.
that's not an option.
I assumed that, but I just want to be clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, looking forward to the city staff satisfying the questions that have been raised by the commission, and hopefully everyone can be on board to move forward on approving this project on February 7th. I too want to thank everybody involved with this. I want to thank all the contractors, the P3 applicant, the city staff, members of our community, of course, the Infrastructure Task Force, and every member of this commission for really doing the deep dive that it has done in order to fully understand what's going on here. Commissioner Glassman and myself have been with this for a little bit longer time than other members of this commission, so it's important that everybody feel comfortable with this project. And I want to thank, really, Marilyn, you did a great job in helping to steer this discussion. I know it takes a village, and and you've done a great job. So if there's no further business of this workshop, we'll I guess the next meeting for this issue will be at this February 7th meeting, right? Very good. And there's also another workshop, a Zoom workshop. What's the date?
Yes, so tomorrow there is a
Town
virtual
hall
town
meeting.
hall. Yes.
It's tomorrow evening at 6 p.m.
Yes.
And to log in on it, you go to fortlauderdale.gov.
Correct. It's on the main page under news. And yes, we look forward to answering all questions.
Okay, so that's tomorrow evening. That's January 25th, yes, at 6 p.m. on the main page of the City of Fort Lauderdale website. And you can participate on the Zoom call to answer any further questions that anyone in the community may have. So having said all that, the meeting is now adjourned. And we'll begin our conference meeting in 10 minutes.